Hello, everybody. My name is Agnes Sunema from Hungary, from the Center for Economic and Regional Studies at Corvinus University of Budapest. And the title of my chapter is, and the topic of my presentation is, Economic versus Political Engagement with China and Taiwan in Central and Eastern Europe. This chapter, as well as this presentation, zooms in on economic relations and their possible effects on the political terrain of relations between China/Taiwan and three Central and Eastern European countries, that is Czechia, Poland, and Hungary. Since there is no diplomatic switch in this region, we analyze whether China or Taiwan is perceived better in diplomatic interactions in the analyzed CEE countries because of increasing Chinese or Taiwanese economic activities, and vice versa, whether diplomatic gestures from the analyzed CEE countries generate more intense Chinese or Taiwanese economic activities. When it comes to economic relations between Central and Eastern Europe and China in general, Chinese companies arrived almost exactly at the same time as Taiwanese companies already in the 1990s, especially smaller companies and medium-sized and bigger companies from the early 2000s. When it comes to the political approach, as you can see, it is the coldest in the case of Czechia and the warmest in the case of Hungary. When it comes to Taiwanese presence in Central and Eastern Europe, it seems that those countries that are more cautious when it comes to their relations with China seem to be open for more intense economic, cultural, and scientific relationships with Taiwan, but they always add that it doesn't mean any conflict or disagreement with the One China policy, and they try to avoid political commitments. When it comes to the political approach, as you can see, the direction of these approaches is completely the opposite compared with the China-CE relations. That is, it is the coldest in the case of the Hungarian-Taiwanese relations and the warmest in the case of the Czech-Taiwanese relations, and Poland is again in between the two positions. Since we are focusing on the effects of or the effects on economic relations, let's start with trade relations. In the CE region, the majority of the countries have relatively low trade with China. With the whole CE region, Czechia, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia shows the highest trade flows, followed by Romania, Slovenia, Serbia, and Bulgaria. As regards the trade between the analyzed three Central and Eastern European countries and China, it indeed increased substantially in the past 20 years. In the case of imports from China, both the EU membership of those three Central and Eastern European countries in 2004 and the launch of the 16+1 initiative in 2012 gave new impetus to the trade relations. However, here, mainly import from China increased substantially, while the growth of Central and Eastern European countries' export to China remained rather modest after 2012. As a result, trade deficits increased rapidly too. I would also draw attention to the fact that despite the absolute growth of trade between the two sides, the relative significance of China has barely increased, as the total trade of Central and Eastern European countries has been growing almost as fast as their trade with China. Likewise, the share of CE countries in total EU-China trade hasn't grown extensively, as the EU-China trade itself has increased rapidly too. When comparing the analyzed three CEE countries' trade with China and Taiwan, as you can see it on the figure, we can conclude that Poland, that is the biggest country in Central and Eastern Europe, is the largest recipient of both Chinese and Taiwanese imports, followed by the Czech Republic and Hungary. On the export side, it is again Poland, followed by Czechia and Hungary that exports the most to China, but it is Czechia that exports the most to Taiwan, followed by Poland and Hungary. When it comes to the three Central and Eastern European countries' export to either China or Taiwan, it has to be emphasized that the vast majority of their exports are generated by local subsidiaries of multinational companies, that is, not by Central and Eastern European owned companies. Now let's move on to investment relations. By 2020, Central and Eastern European countries, the analyzed three Central and Eastern European countries, accumulated more than 5,500 million USD Chinese and more than 2,600 million USD Taiwanese FDI, of which Hungary received the most, followed by Czechia and Poland. Interestingly, the numbers of companies show a somewhat opposite trend. That is, the number of Chinese companies is highest in Poland, followed by Hungary and Czechia, while the number of Taiwanese companies is the highest in Czechia, followed by Poland and Hungary. It means that Hungary has the highest stock of FDI from both China and Taiwan, while it hosts only a third as many Chinese companies as Poland and a quarter as many Taiwanese companies as the Czech Republic. The explanation is relatively simple. Hungary hosts mainly big multinational companies from both China and Taiwan, with each of these investments having a relatively high value, while Poland and Czechia host mainly smaller companies. All in all, even those Chinese investments are still dwarfed by, for example, German multinationals' investments into these countries. So when calculating a percentage share, we found that Chinese FDI stock is around or below 1% of total inward FDI stock in the analyzed three Central and Eastern European countries. When it comes to factors that attract companies to the CEE region, we differentiated between three types of pull factors: macroeconomic, institutional, and political, as you can see it on this table. Based on the interviews, we showed that Chinese and Taiwanese companies are attracted mainly by macroeconomic factors to the analyzed three countries. These factors are, among others, market access to the whole EU market, relatively low factor costs, mainly labor costs, the qualification of the labor force, as well as company-level relations. Nevertheless, institutional factors such as free trade agreements, institutional stability, tax incentives, and the activities of investment promotion agencies are also important for both Chinese and Taiwanese companies when locating in the three analyzed countries. Political factors, such as the level of political relations between home and the respective host country, political gestures and confidence-building measures, seem to play an important role only for Chinese companies. So these factors are indicated with light gray in this table. So these are important only for the Chinese companies, whereas all the other factors are similarly important for both Taiwanese as well as Chinese companies when locating in the analyzed three Central and Eastern European countries. To answer the core question of the research, that is whether economic interactions affect diplomatic relations or vice versa, let's start with China. In Central and Eastern Europe, Chinese companies tend to invest more in politically friendly countries such as Hungary or Serbia, while investing less in countries that make critical statements about China from time to time. Economic relations, however, do not really have an impact on political ties. That is, more Chinese investment doesn't necessarily result in better political relations between China and the respective CEE countries. Political relations seem to be much more influenced by international trends, mainly by EU-level processes and decisions and the US stance. Hungary seems to be an exception here, at least in the sense that it goes against EU trends and doesn't see engagement with China as risky as other European Union countries. Still, Even in the Hungarian case, we do not see evidence that economic relationship is positively affecting the political relationship, since Hungarian-Chinese political relations have been consistently good over the past 2 decades, while China's economic presence is still not significant compared to, for instance, that of Western Europe. While in the case of Chinese companies, political ties tend to affect economic relations rather than vice versa, we couldn't really find evidence of political factors affecting the location decisions of Taiwanese companies in the analyzed 3 CE countries. In fact, Taiwanese companies seem to make such decisions based on other criteria. Big Taiwanese multinational companies in particular act in a highly pragmatic manner. They do not really take account of political relations, but focus purely on business interests. That is, if they receive more investment incentives in Hungary, they choose that over Czechia, even if the latter is politically more friendly than the former. Another interesting link was revealed by the interviews, that is, the majority of big Taiwanese multinationals with a presence in the analyzed 3 CE countries have a connection to China, either a subsidy on the mainland or cooperation at the global level. These Taiwanese companies are leveraging these contacts and tend to locate where other Chinese companies are located. Similarly, since Taiwanese multinationals do not want to risk their already existing relations with Chinese multinationals, it seems that they are keeping a low profile in CEE and do not emphasize or even hide their Taiwanese-ness. Consequently, we couldn't really find evidence of economic interactions affecting diplomatic relations between Taiwan and the 3 CE countries. Although it seems that neither political nor economic relations have an impact on one another in the Taiwan CE case, recent developments have shown that diplomatic gestures may affect economic interactions. Lithuania, Czechia, Poland, and Slovakia sent coronavirus vaccines to Taiwan during the COVID pandemic. In return, Taipei sent a business delegation to 3 of these countries that could end up in more investments or business deals between CE countries and Taiwan. Based on interview results, there may be another chance for Taiwanese investments to contribute to better political relations with the analyzed 3 Central and Eastern European countries in the future, since interviewees believe that if Taiwanese investment was introduced in sectors other than manufacturing and assembly, for instance in high technology, innovation or R&D, that could possibly have a positive spillover effect on political relations.